In my negotiation sequence, we never give a price. We never make an offer ever. And I know that's quite a bit different than what you guys are probably used to, and I'm not going to say that my way is the only way. There's more than one road to California. In my world, we never give a price. We never make an offer. And that's for three specific reasons. Number one, an offer is a commodity to shop. Number two is that oftentimes when you have really quality, high intent lead flow, that the seller's price is going to be lower than your price. So it creates in my business what we call a type 2 error. So a type 1 error is a realized loss, meaning you did a deal that you shouldn't have done. But you have an unrealized gain, which is a type 2 error, which means that there's a process or a system that creates a scenario that you don't do a deal you should have done. So a deal that you should have done that you didn't do still creates a loss. It's just an unrealized loss. Okay. So if you make an offer for 250 and they would have taken 200, how much money did you just lose? 50 grand. That's a problem. And then number three, because a lot of what I do is around deal structure, sub two, sub three, some now, some later deals. If I make an offer, then the assumption is that it's a cash offer. But if I don't make an offer, then we have a negotiation sequence. And so it's easier for me. Number three, the road to deal structure is paved and bridged with good negotiation. So if I don't make an offer, they give me the price, then I can then tell them I can do that price if it's another way, and then go into deal structure. So these are the three reasons why we never make an offer. Then it comes down to, well, what does the process look like specifically? Okay. And the process is really two parts. Number one, what we call the triage call, which is the first contact that we have with the seller. And then number two, what we call the perfect presentation, which is either our in-person presentation or the way that we do it, everything is virtual. But it comes from a process of negotiation where we don't give a price. We never make an offer. So there's 5 numbers that I need to know whether I can buy a house: mortgage, walkaway, repairs, ARV, arrears. Okay. So mortgage is the amount owed on the property. Walkaway is the amount of cash that the seller wants in addition to whatever is owed on the property for us to make a deal. Repairs are the amount of repairs obviously needed to get us to that ARV figure. ARV is the after repair value. That's the amount of the value once those repairs are done. And then the arrears are the back payments on any loans. Whenever we go through what we call the triage call, we're going to get 4 of these 5 numbers. The only number that we're not going to get is the value. Let's talk about the first phone call with the seller, because the beginning of the negotiation happens at that point. My first question is going to be, John, tell me about the house and just sort of what you've got going on with it. So that's actually 2 different questions, all right? That's tell me about the house and tell me about your circumstance. And so people, what you'll see is that they'll kind of gravitate to whatever side of that question that they decide to gravitate to. So you'll have a situation where some people say, well, Brad, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,400 feet, built in 1971. So that's tell me about the house. And then you'll have some people gravitate to, Brad, seriously, this happened. I need you to come buy this house before I burn it down because my ex-husband's in there. Serious conversation, okay? We have a lively seller here. So that's a situational question. If somebody says, and whenever you ask that question, tell me about the house and what you got going on with it, and they go into, well, this is the house, that's fine. We don't have to talk about the situation. But if somebody goes into the situation solely, then we have to bring them back into the house. The main questions that I want to know is age, beds, bath, square footage, if they know. And then the second question, so we went into question number 1, tell me about the house, what you got going on with it. Question number 2 is, so let me ask John, what repairs does the house need that either a buyer would ask for or potentially a lender or an appraiser might require? What are we asking for? We're asking for, what's this number? Repairs. Now, we're not looking at the house. We're going to take the seller at their word. We're going to verify later. So like the whole Truman concept of, trust but verify, but we're going to trust them at their word at the beginning. Now, part of that question is an appraiser might require. Most sellers don't even understand that an appraiser might require certain repairs to be made. And so we're beginning to build an authority frame. One book that I highly recommend is by Orrin Claff, Pitch Anything. Okay. So the idea that there's a difference in selling and pitching, and make no mistake, guys, if you're buying a house, you are pitching a service. Okay. So we want to be in a situation where we're creating an understanding with our seller of the situations that they might encounter in the future with someone else. If they go to the retail market or they deal with other people, that they might be in a situation where they have to deal with appraisal required repairs. So question 1, tell me about the house, what you got going on with it. Question number 2, so what repairs, John, does the house need that either a buyer would ask for or maybe an appraiser might require? So now I have the amount of repairs. Okay. Number 3 question for triage is, there are beginnings of a temp check on motivation, which is, so John, let me ask, how soon are you hoping to get the house sold? Now, guys, it's house, not home, in my opinion. Okay. I'm a believer that people sell the house, but nobody ever sells their home. So House is a less charged emotional word than what home is. So, John, let me ask, how soon are you hoping to get the house sold? Now, whatever they say, we're going to be okay with. We're going to agree with. So if they say, Brad, I need to sell in 6 months, gotcha, no problem, 6 months. I'll make a note of that. Now, sometimes someone will say as soon as possible, or they'll say yesterday, right? Now that's what we want to hear. Interesting. So as soon as possible. Well, for some people that means 30 days, and for some people that means like literally tomorrow. So which is better for you? So we're going to do an alternative choice close, and we're going to agree with whatever they say. If they say 30 days, we're going to say, hey, no problem. 30 days is fine for us. I'll make a note of that in the paperwork. Or if they say, I really want to close tomorrow, it's like, well, I would close tomorrow if title work is ready. Do you have the title ready? And they're going to say no. And it's like, okay, no problem. We'll just say 7 days to give us some extra time and hope that we can close earlier. Would that be okay? Next is going to be, well, how much is owed? And so here's the problem with making offers. You guys have no idea what somebody owes on the property. They may owe more than what you're offering, and then you got a problem. Or they may owe nothing, and then they have a lot of wiggle room, and you guys just don't know. So before I ever make an offer, which is never, before they make me an offer, I want to know how much is owed. Okay, so the question is, so John, let me ask, is there a mortgage we need to take care of when the house is sold, or is it free and clear? Now, that's an alternative choice question. It's either yes, it's free and clear, or no, there's a mortgage. If they say no, there's a mortgage, we're going to ask, okay, no problem. Roughly, how much is the balance? And they're going to tell us. And then we're going to ask, now, John, are the payments current or is it a little bit behind? So let's say the mortgage is $200,000 in this scenario. And let's say the repairs we've already kind of pegged at 20K, something but not nothing. And then, we've gone into arrears and he says, well, I'm 2K behind on payments, which is roughly 1 month. Now we have almost everything that we need in terms of deal structure. Again, the 5 numbers that we need to make sure that we know before we begin to really negotiate. And so the last question is the walkaway. So again, the walkaway is the amount of cash that the seller is asking for in addition to what's owed. Okay, so we're beginning for my deal structure people to begin to plant the seeds of an understanding of subject to. A sub-2 deal is a deal where you're taking title subject to an existing lien. So that means that if there's a mortgage, you're not qualifying for the mortgage, you're not assuming the mortgage, you're not asking permission from the bank to pay the payments on the mortgage, you're taking title subject to that existing lien. For us to begin to deal structure this, the problem with sub-2 is negotiating it. It's not understanding it. And negotiating it in a way that's 100% upfront with the people that we're working with, but also doesn't create fear and uncertainty. So let me back up. We're on the triage call. First, conversation with our seller. We've asked them, so tell me about the house and what you got going on with it. We've asked about the repairs. We've asked about timeline. We've asked about the mortgage and is it a little bit behind? And now we're asking for the final question of 5 questions. How much are you hoping for, John? What's your walkaway number? So the way that I like to do this is there's a lot of social psychology and like sales psychology around giving someone a reason to do something, even if the reason that you give someone has nothing to do with the actual question. So in other words, whenever I used to go to lunch with my sister, she would always want to pay. And I'd say, well, sis, I wore my favorite socks today. I think it's time for me to pay. And she would almost let me do it because I wore my favorite socks. That has nothing to do with that, actually what was going on. Question number 5. So John, let me tell you a little bit about what we do. We buy property like this all the time. When I buy the property, I pay for all of the costs, things like transfer tax, title insurance, roof certification, termite clearance. That list goes on and on. I can buy the house in as-is condition. So that means 2 things. Number 1, there's no warranty that you give me. Number 2, you're in a situation where you don't have to do any repairs. The repairs that we talked about, you don't have to do. And so I can close on the date of your choice and close cash. So knowing how I'm going to buy the property, how much are you hoping to walk away with? This is your check at closing after all the expenses have been considered, after I do all the repairs on the property, and we close, the house is sold, you don't have to worry about a thing. This is your check at closing. So how much are you hoping for? Question mark. Pause. So we will never interrupt that pause. And so they're going to say a number. Well, Brad, I was hoping for 25,000, and we know the value's worth 300K. 25,000. Is that the least you would take? Well, Brad, I'm not really sure. I could probably go down to 20. 20. You couldn't see yourself doing any better than 20? Well, how much were you hoping for, Brad? What's your offer? Well, John, I really don't have a number in mind. And it sounds like you're not stuck at 20. So let me ask, how much are you willing to go down? Well, I could probably do 15. 15. Huh. 15,000? You guys see what I'm doing here? I've never made an offer. I've never made a price. We're getting them down to their lowest common denominator in terms of what they have to have in cash. We've already segmented deal structure in their minds because we're just talking about the cash at closing. The question that we have to ask is, do we need to go to the next step? I'm often asked on triage, like, what's the goal? The goal is to ascertain two things. Well, really one thing at the highest level. Do I have a motivated seller? And motivation is shown to you guys one of two different ways. Number one is either in price. In other words, they're willing to discount based on what they think the value is. Or number two, it's in circumstance. So in this scenario, the house is worth 300K. They have a mortgage of 200K. The walkaway is 25K. It needs a little bit of repairs, but they're willing to discount price. So I'm going to set this a point. Okay. If guys, if you're local, go to the house. So this is a deal you want to put into, into action. Okay. But this is a motivation in price part, but also in circumstance because they're 2K behind on the payments. If you see that your seller has a big problem, then set the appointment, see what you can negotiate out. But we want to ascertain, number one, do I have a motivated seller, and set that appointment. The next step is the perfect presentation. So the perfect presentation is set up in a situation where we're going to be in person. I'm going to park on the street, not in the driveway. I'm going to arrive about 10 minutes early. I'm going to have a legal pad, and I'm going to have two pens. I'm going to have one pen here on my shirt, and I'm going to have one pen in my hand. Whenever I get to the house, I'm going to park on the street about 10 minutes early. I'm going to start to ascertain what is the condition of the exterior. I'm going to look at the roof, the siding, the windows on 4 sides of the property, front and 2 sides. Okay, 3 sides of the property, front and 2 sides. And I'm going to make a list of repairs, some of which are already included in the repairs that they gave me on triage. You guys with me on that? So a lot of the repairs they've already told me. I'm going to knock on the front door. I do not ring the doorbell. I knock on the front door. I step back off of the front porch. I look up the street. I want them to acknowledge me before I acknowledge them. To put this in comparison, I'm a relatively good sized guy. I'm 5'9", but kind of stocky. If I have a young lady there that's maybe 19 years old, that's pretty petite, or I have an older elderly lady, I don't want to be 3 inches from the front door whenever they open it. That does not begin to create comfort. Okay, so I step back off the porch, I whistle, I look up the street, they acknowledge me. I say, hey, I'm Brad, I'm here to buy the house. I'm beginning to do an embedded command at the front door. So I wear loafers that I can just easily slip off. If you're in an Asian community or other cultural aspects of this, people really appreciate you taking off your shoes. If the house is clean, I will do that. Now, if we had enough time, I would go through, if there's dog poop in the house, you have to step in it because it's going to help your negotiation sequence later. That's the room that you close in. So whenever I get into the front door, then I'm going to say, just give me the grand tour and we'll see what we have. As we go through this, it's viewing, rapport, dread, numbers, hammer, close. So I'm viewing the house and I'm building rapport. Rapport is important to a certain extent, but then you can create negative rapport by trying to just create more rapport. You know, true rapport, guys, is them understanding that they're in the hands of a professional that can solve their problem. So at a certain point, to skip to dread, whenever I'm about 3/4 of the way through the house, there are a series of questions that I ask to really create an emotion that I want that seller to have. So the first question is to really bump them up emotionally, which is, so I talk to a lot of sellers, like, remind me, how quickly were you hoping to close? That's a good sign, right? If you're a seller and you have a buyer in the house and they already know the price and they've seen 3/4 of the house, that's a good sign. Like, when are you hoping to close? Number 2 is, let me ask John, like, what have you done so far to get the house sold? Now, if they're in a situation where it's been listed in the past, or they've had other wholesalers or investors back out, then I'm going to dive deep into that pain. Okay. And then the final question is, so let me ask John, like, what are you going to do with the house if the house doesn't sell? That's the most important, guys. What are you going to do with the house if the house doesn't sell? There's only 3 responses to that. The first response is, well, it has to sell, Brad. We're going to sell the house. That gives me what I need to know. The other response is, well, Brad, will just rent it, which in my mind says they'll accept payments. I can do a deal structure on this situation and get them to accept the payments. Or number 3 is, you know, maybe cards to the chest, like, well, we don't really have to sell, Brad. It's okay. We'll just stay here, which is extremely rare. Then I'm going to go through the numbers on my break-even section. Okay. We're going to agree on a price the whole way. We're going to then go into, so after seeing the facts and figures, John, I know you're hoping for 25K, but as you can see, the numbers don't substantiate it. Is that the least you'll take? Is that the lowest you'll go? You can't see yourself doing any better than that. And then we're going to begin to pivot into deal structure. Okay, so we never give a price. We never make an offer in this entire segment. This was an extreme crash course in ballpark on this process that really I could go into for 2 or 3 hours.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.